This is silver. We all know it. We all love it. A lot of us absolutely love this stuff. We know that. Now, this is very important. There's another metal that many of us know and love, copper. Copper is something that many of us have on occasion stacked away, knowing that it's a very, very cheap entry point and that there are some upsides. Now, this is a channel where we like to talk about facts, not feelings. And looky here. This is an article from the Wall Street Journal. Trump's copper products tariff crashes metals market. Okay, so many of us are wondering what's happening with silver dipping and all that kind of stuff. This is not really talking about that, to be clear. This is an article, and it's talking about the U.S. copper futures plunging 20% because of the tariffs that Trump has put in place. And articles like this are very good at telling you a pinpoint in time of what is going on, but they don't really tell you why, and they don't really tell you the projection of what this could mean for the future. It's just kind of a snapshot, and that's okay as long as you're willing to do your part and figure out the rest of the story and not just assume anything is always good or anything is always bad. And if you're not wanting to do that, that's fine. That's what this channel is here for, right? So yes, we have a tariff, and this is not over every single product of copper, but it's over a lot of it. Things such as pipe fittings, electrical wiring, and other components, as it says right here, but not the entire value of the product. According to the fact sheet from the White House, the copper tariff won't be added on top of tariffs on automobiles, for example. The copper tariff will insulate domestic manufacturers of electronics, plumbing fittings, and other products, but not miners, smelters, or others looking to invest in domestic production capacity. That's very interesting. Shares of the Freeport McMoran, the biggest U.S. copper producer, ended at 9.5% lower, while those of Ivanhoe Electric, which plans to start construction of a big new Arizona mine next year, shed nearly 16%. Traders had been bracing for exemptions, such as those being sought by Chile, which accounts for more than 70% of U.S. supply. Although traders bid up U.S. prices to new highs, the premium over the global price is set in London's trading pits, which never reach 50%. Now, in a flash, the U.S. prices are below where they were before Trump first pitched a 50% copper tariff in early July, and back in line with global prices around $4.50 a pound. That's very, very interesting. So copper right here, we know that silver is often a byproduct mined of copper, but when I look at the rest of the story based on the facts that I have available to me, such as Reuters, Financial Times, and many other articles, we are seeing that what we saw during COVID, not necessarily with copper, but with many of the resources and products America needs, not just in normal activities, but in times of crisis, need to be produced here so that in a situation such as COVID, we don't have to rely on the logistics of others to prop up the needs of our people. So it is my understanding, based on past events and based on the articles that I've read, that this shift is going to cause copper supply demands in the United States to grow rather than it being, offloaded to other countries and then imported to us. So that being said, many of the copper type companies are going to be shifting most likely to Mexico and Canada as trying to get a part of the USMCA, but we might also see higher prices currently for businesses and the raw materials until those take off, but we're also going to see big moves in the American market when it comes to copper, because like I said, America doesn't seem, under this administration, to want to have to rely on other countries for basic needs. And copper wire is definitely a basic need for so many when it comes to the rebuilding and wiring of this nation. So this could really change the global price gaps on the immediate scale, but the future means security, which is, what a lot of these types of tariffs are trying to do, bring back manufacturing to America. So the big question is, how much does the American consumer use in copper per year, and how much can we supply if we were the ones to mine it? So if we look at it, it is estimated that 920,000 tons, that's metric tons, which is roughly 46% of the U.S. copper usage, is in construction. Makes sense. All the wiring and things like that. 420,000 metric tons, which is roughly 20%, are for electricals and electronics. 340,000 tons are in things like automobiles and transportation. We have 200,000 metric tons in industrial machinery, roughly 10%, and then only 120,000 in things like consumer products. Maybe that's hair dryers, things like that. I don't know. It doesn't tell me. But that being said, we know that that is going to be sitting at about 2 million metric tons of refined copper per year in all of those sectors. And then I have found that we have quite a bit of untapped reserves here in America, because that's the question. If we use that much copper as the biggest consumer economy, do we have enough to sustain ourselves within our own mines? And here are a couple of things you need to know based on my projections. So there's Resolution Copper in Arizona. It's owned by Rio, I believe it's Tinto and BHP, and it's estimated to supply currently 25% of U.S. copper demand for decades, and it's stalling due to permitting and land use controversies. So basically, it is able to produce 25 of the demand and could do a lot more, but it really is kind of locked into place because it has to be permitted, and those permits are not being issued, or at least they haven't been under recent administrations. Pebble Mine is the big one that many of us know about in Alaska. It is estimated to contain 70 billion with a B pounds of copper. 107 million ounces of gold is what most people know, and this project has been blocked repeatedly over environmental concerns over the Bristol Bay fishery. We obviously also have Rosemount Copper in Arizona, which estimates 5.4 billion pounds of copper, and that is delayed by litigation and environmental review. So you see, there are billions and billions, probably closer to 100 billion pounds of this stuff sitting out and litigation and permitting. So that's the biggest thing that we know. Permitting delays from federal and state environmental reviews usually take from 7 to 10 years before construction of a new mine can begin. The environmental groups and indigenous communities are often the ones that challenge the new mines in court. Projects like Pebble and Resolution get caught between changing presidential administrations because they'll have, a lot of, green lights during one administration, a lot of red lights during the other, and so it does leave a lot of limbo. And some remote sites that are out there have really, really hard infrastructure issues that then they didn't attack those permitting issues, such as roads to take product in and out, and I'm talking about big machinery, which means big, sturdy roads, that type of stuff. So that being said, it is going to be very, very beneficial for America to start making its own copper again, but we're probably going to see a little bit of market lapse trying to get that started and trying to get more of the current companies into the USMCA. That's at least what I'm reading here. But believe it or not, the U.S. copper consumption is rising, though the domestic production has declined from over 2 million metric tons in the 1990s to just over 1.1 million in recent years. So we have almost gone down in half of our own mining production. We import more than 35% of copper from Chile, Peru, Canada, and Mexico, which are obviously vulnerabilities when it comes to supply chains if you have to go outside the market, or outside your own market, I should say. It is forecasted, however, that the demand for copper is likely to double by 2035, which is where the U.S. has an opportunity to become a major supplier to its own energy, whether it be clean energy or standard. Obviously, job creation in rural areas, as many of these mines are going to be that, and reduce the risk of reliance of other nations in geopolitically risk averse events that might happen. So if the U.S. copper mines could be unlocked, that would add billions to the economy and possibly lower the input costs for renewable infrastructure and national defense. So those are all things that having copper mined in the United States might be able to help. So we're looking at Arizona, Alaska, Montana, New Mexico, and Nevada. Those are really the big five that I know of, but there could be more. There always could be more, as we know. But that's kind of where we're at. And if we know that silver is a byproduct of copper, then does that mean that we have the possibility of having a lot of silver in our hands that is American grown, so to speak, silver? Well, I looked into that too, and we noticed that a lot of countries right now that are mining silver that are coming to us are going to be South America, Central America, Mexico, things like that. Even up in Canada, they have some amazing mines. America, not so much, but we do have some things to look at. And this is going to be according to the USGS, which is the Geological Survey. And they're estimating that the undiscovered deposits of silver could be roughly in the 13 billion ounce range, which is really, really high. If you think that 1,000 millions equals 1 billion, well, 13.8 of those. Identified resources yet to be classified reserve in the roughly 400,000 tons, and provable and probable reserves and operating for 200 million ounces. So that is crazy. And that's based on what we talked about, the U.S. Geological Survey. Only a small fraction of the underground silver has been drilled, confirmed, permitted, and economically certified. It's expensive, as we know, and time-consuming and contingent on market prices. They're not going to just dig, get it all out, because then the price goes down and they lose money as they dig it. So that's all to be calculated, I guess. So in the U.S., most of our silver is a byproduct of copper, right there, lead and zinc mining, and thus can only be counted using incidental silver estimates. We haven't necessarily targeted silver on its own, but if we're going to be mining billions of pounds in copper in the future, we might be able to assume that at least 100 million ounces or more could be a part of that equation, which, hey, maybe that keeps silver locked in for a little bit in the $40s range. Who knows? But I thought that was interesting. I thought this was an interesting article here from the New York Times, and I thought context was needed because we all see news like that there's a huge tariff on copper and that's bad, or good, depending on where you sit. But the context is really not about the copper. It's about being able to sustain ourselves, being self-reliant, and not have to rely on others. And in fact, probably be able to help others by exporting it ourselves because we have surplus. So we have billions and billions of metric tons of copper, and we have the ability to get that out in our own nation, so that if there are supply chain issues, be it copper, be it what we saw in N95 masks and medical supplies during COVID, we're able to take care of ourselves. Another incidental thing that we saw is trying to get the most favorable nation status with Europe on medications, so that Americans are not having to pay just crazy high prices on their medications, and so they end up being sold to us at the same rate that, let's say, England would sell to France or to Italy or to whatever. We are the biggest consumers. They jack up prices. Because that's the case, obviously, our own in-house people aren't much better. But hey, big steps, big steps. So that's what we have for you today. If you love copper, hopefully this was very informative to you. If you love silver as a byproduct of copper, hopefully it was very informative to you too. So that being said, stay classy and current with the culture of currency.